The trade agreement that we have now, the T-MEC, was signed in 2018 by President Trump the first time around. He tried to rush through this trade agreement before Claudia's mentor, AMLO, came in because they knew, all right, here's a left-wing president that's going to come in, so we're going to try and jam in all this bullshit right before he comes in so that we can keep taking advantage of Mexico because Mexico's our backyard. And that was the impression that the United States has been under, and that's how they feel for the longest time, right? So with this trade agreement, it's basically NAFTA 2.0. NAFTA was the first trade agreement that Mexico, US, and Canada signed way back in 93, 94. It went into effect in 94. And that trade agreement, just like this trade agreement, is supposed to be treating all these countries on an equal level. But it's bullshit because you can't have an economically powerful country and a weaker economically developed country be treated on the same standards on an equal playing field. It's just not equal. By its nature of existing in that form of dealing with each other, you're never going to be equal. You can't compare the US, which is an imperialistic, capitalist, hegemonic powerhouse across the globe, destroying and destabilizing countries, with Mexico, its southern neighbor, who had been obliterated economically for decades. The first NAFTA trade agreement, everybody knew it. That's when the Zapatistas rose up. There's a fire documentary on Netflix called 1994 that touches on that, but everybody knew this. Before NAFTA, Mexico was self-sustaining as far as food went. It was self-sustaining. It could take care of itself. It could take care of its people with its food. NAFTA came in, flooded the market with cheap corn, flooded the market with cheap vegetables, basically destroyed wages, destroyed unions, just destroyed so much of its economic base. And it ends up being something to where, like, fast forward, and it was not uncommon to hear of entire towns where there was no working age males in Mexico because everybody had gone up north to the US to work. And all you had was kids, you had women, and you had older folks that were in these towns. That was a pretty common thing through pretty much every state that Mexico had. So you can't compare those two countries on an equal playing field of saying, oh, I'm not going to charge you taxes on anything you import, and you're not going to charge me on taxes on anything that I import. It's just not the same thing. By the way, during that same time period of the first NAFTA with Bill Clinton, after it was signed, it was the highest levels of deportations that the U.S. has ever done of Mexican citizens getting kicked back into Mexico, right? So all this talk now about deportations, it's a lot of, oh, they're flooding our borders. Shut the fuck up, lame. It's not flooding our borders, right? So fast forward to 2018. The NAFTA 2.0 gets signed, the T-MEC. That gets shoved through. And two things happened that completely flipped and backfired on the US. One was AMLO came in. President came in, Claudia's mentor, and he immediately started nationalizing a bunch of resources like lithium that had just been discovered. He started putting money back in to a lot of the education system, started putting money back into the agriculture system to get some self-sustainability going, started putting all this money into domestic production and started transferring resources from shutting down all the corruption into domestic production that basically elevated and kicked up Mexico's capability to be able to take care of itself and start to repair a lot of the damage that was done. While at the same time, the pandemic hit, the US wanted to crank up its war against China and started saying, fuck that, all these American companies, we want you guys to pull out of China and we need you guys to invest here in Mexico and Canada, which we have a free trade agreement with. And that's exactly what happened. Not only did that start happening and a lot of companies started putting money and building factories more in Mexico, but all of a sudden, all kinds of Chinese companies also started putting money and flooding back into Mexico. So now Mexico, much more equal playing field than it was before, and now all of a sudden Trump is crying and bitching and complaining, talking about, oh, we signed a bad trade agreement. It doesn't matter. The point is, anything that comes later on down the pipeline that Trump's trying to pull, Claudia and her administration have shown time and time again that they're ready for this. Fucking stay cold, stay ready so you ain't gotta get ready, fool.